5 more magic bags to stock your shelves and save the day. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I'm putting together some meals in a bag, aka emergency meal kits. These kits contain everything you need to make a complete meal, right down to and including the water. If there's water needed at all to prepare the meal, I include the water in the bag as well. So if there is an emergency, a disaster, any situation where you may not be able to get things from the store, or the power goes out and you're trying not to open your fridge so you can conserve the chill that's in there so your food won't spoil before the power comes back on, or maybe your power didn't come back on and your generator has run out of fuel and all your food has spoiled. Or maybe it's a situation where you lost your job, your spouse lost their job, all of a sudden you find yourself without the budget to buy groceries like you normally would. Maybe you fall ill and not only are you out of work, but maybe now you're not able to go to the store easily or at all, and maybe you're just physically not able to put a lot of energy into preparing a meal. But these meals are not only appropriate for emergency situations like these, but hey, don't we all have nights when we just don't have the time or the energy to prepare a complicated meal, but you don't have the budget to eat out? Maybe you worked late and you need to call home and ask your teenager to start some supper. There are so many reasons why you might use these meals. They're great to take camping, traveling, so that you don't have to blow your whole budget eating out every meal. You can bring these to a friend or a family in need if you want to bless them with a meal, but you want them to have a little bit of flexibility with when they eat it and not have to refrigerate it and eat it right away. You can send these meals with a college student, any young adults going out into their own apartment for the first time. You'll find umpteen uses for these meals, and having them ready on your shelves is a great feeling. We do have a playlist that you can check out with many of these meal ideas that we've done in the past, but this time I wanted to add a bit of a challenge, and I challenged myself to make some meals with only items found at Dollar Tree. It's pretty limiting doing Dollar Tree meals, and even more so when you can't utilize the refrigerated and frozen section. My Dollar Tree doesn't even have a refrigerated and frozen section, and I know many of you out there are in the same boat. So let me know down in the comments, does your Dollar Tree have the frozen and refrigerated food? It does bear mentioning that Dollar Tree is not always the least expensive place to buy certain items. Even as I was buying items for this challenge, I had to cringe a little bit buying name brand canned vegetables, for example, for $1.25, knowing that I could get the Walmart brand for 64 cents, or canned beans that I could get for 78 cents, but that's not the point of this video. First of all, it's the fun of the challenge, trying to see what you can make for meals with those limited items. It can lead to a little bit more creativity. It's also about acknowledging the fact that there may be people out there who, Dollar Tree might be the best store that they have access to for whatever reason. But the good news in all this is that if you're not limited to Dollar Tree, you can make these meals even more affordably and maybe even upgrade a few of the ingredients. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how I do these bags and then how I turn them into meals. By the end of the video, we're going to have 4 dinners and a dessert. And make sure that you stay tuned to the end because I'm going to show you some bonus items that were brand new at my Dollar Tree that you could easily use to make even more meals. Let's go. The first dish that I'm going to do today is going to be chili mac, which is such a simple homey dish. Now the idea for this came about because I was thinking about what kind of simple meals I make with macaroni noodles. And I thought about American chop suey, which that's what we call it here in Maine, but a lot of people in different parts of the country call it goulash, so maybe you're familiar with that. It's a simple macaroni and tomato dish that usually has ground beef, and I thought there's no shelf-stable ground beef at Dollar Tree, so the closest thing that I could think of was canned chili, which would have ground beef in it. So I figured I could turn the chop suey idea into a chili mac, and that's what I did. So here it is. Now I label them 2 places. I label them on the short side here, and this is just a chalkboard label with chalk. And that's so I can set them on the shelf this way and I can read what's in the bag. But they also have this label, and this one here is an adhesive CD label. And this is what I use to be able to put the whole recipe in. So it says the name of the dish. So if I have them this way on the shelf, you can also see the name of the dish. And then you can slide the card out, and on the back it would have the ingredients and the cooking instructions. And I will have links to all these things down in the description box, so make sure you check there if you're interested in putting yours together this way. I'll have links to the bags that I use, links to the chalkboard labels, links to the CD case labels, and I'll also link to a couple of other items that I've recently gotten that I might try. Might try something a little bit different with the cards, but I'll link all those options down below. So for the chili mac, this one's really simple. I'm just going to be using some macaroni. We're not going to use this whole box, so I'm going to repackage some of it into a different container. I'm going to be using a can of the chili and a can of the diced tomatoes, and then I've got some water to cook it up with. So because we're not going to be using all of this macaroni, I'm going to be putting some of it into a separate container. You could use a Ziploc baggie, like a little quart-sized freezer baggie, and that would be fine if you're just going to be storing this meal for say 6 months to a year, and then you're going to cycle through it. This particular meal, everything is really, really shelf stable, so this could last a lot longer. So if you wanted to do that, I would suggest using something besides the Ziploc baggie. You could use a mylar bag with or without an oxygen absorber. I think would be fine for several years. You could use a food saver bag, like a vacuum sealer bag. Those are not as long term as the mylar bags, but it would be fine for several years. The other thing that you could use is a mason jar. Those are a really good airtight and pest proof way to store things like pasta. So you could put it in a pint-sized mason jar that would hold 2 cups of pasta. But because I'm cooking this up tonight after I put it together, I'm just going to be using the Ziploc bag. And I am going to be using this plastic baggie holder just to make it easier to get the stuff in. So I'm going to do 2 cups of pasta. All right, so just zip that up good, and that's going to be good to go in the bag. And of course, you could also put a can of fruit or a can of vegetable in there to serve as a side dish. You could do a can of corn. Some people would even put their corn right into the chili mac. You could do something like a can of peaches, a can of fruit for a side dish as well. I'm going to be using my butane emergency stove to prepare a lot of these meals, just to demonstrate how easy it would be to do this in a grid down emergency. I'm going to start by adding the macaroni to the pan. I'm going to next add the can of tomatoes. And don't forget the can opener. And I am not going to drain this. I'm just going to dump the whole thing in with the liquid. I'm going to go ahead and add the whole bottle of water. And I do like to use it to rinse out the can of tomatoes, just to make sure we get all the tomato juice and bits out of the can. Go ahead and give this a stir. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add the fuel, lock it in place, and light the stove. That's on pretty high. I'm just going to bring this to a boil. I'm going to give it one more stir, and then I'm going to put a lid on it and let it lower it and let it simmer until the pasta is getting mostly cooked. Okay, we are now definitely simmering. We're going to give this a stir. I'm going to put on the lid and turn it down to a simmer. And I'm going to simmer this for about 10 minutes and then see how the pasta is doing. So I am going to open this and stir this occasionally, and you can see with these one dish pasta recipes what happens is you put in just enough water to basically be absorbed by the pasta, so you don't have to drain it. The pasta cooks. The starch from the pasta is going to help to thicken your dish a little bit if you want the dish to be thick. And you're not going to be wasting any water, which is possibly going to be a precious commodity during a time of emergency. So that's why one dish pasta meals can be really good for this type of situation. Okay, so it's been 10 minutes and this pasta is done. And you can see that pretty much all the liquid has been absorbed. There's really no liquid left in there to speak of. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and add the chili. That really is simmering pretty well, and I have this burner turned almost as low as it can go. Those things are powerful. I think this pasta could have even gone just 8 minutes. 8 minutes would have been fine, probably 8 or 9. Now, in my mind, I think this actually tastes fine just as it is, but at Dollar Tree, they do have, of course, salt and pepper if you want this to be a little bit more saltier. And they also sell chili powder if you wanted to add a little bit of extra chili flavor. I think that I wouldn't necessarily put the whole bottles into the bag, but you could add some of this into a small little baggie, or you could put them into a very small jar, like a little baby food jar. I use those a lot for things like this. But there's one more option that you could do to make this a little bit different, and that is add some cheese and make it a cheesy chili mac. So that kind of gives you a whole different dish right there. The next dish I'm making is a chicken enchilada rice bake. Pretty simple, not a lot of explanation needed, so let's get going. Like all the other bakes, this can be done in a pot on the stove just the same if you don't have access to anything to bake it in, but it would work great in a Dutch oven as well. The ingredients for the chicken enchilada rice bake are obviously going to be rice. Now this rice that they sell at Dollar Tree is a 2-pound bag. We only need 1 pound, so I'm going to be putting some of this rice into a smaller bag or a smaller container. And just like the macaroni that we talked about, you could put it into a Ziploc bag if you know you're going to be using it up before too long. You could put it into mylar, you could put it into glass mason jar, food saver bag, anything like that. So we're going to start with the rice. We're going to be using 1 packet of taco seasoning. This is a box of 3 packets that they sell at Dollar Tree. We're just going to use 1 packet out of there. We're going to be using a can of black beans and a can of corn. We're going to put in a can of chicken and a can of enchilada sauce. Now you could do 2 cans of chicken because these are the small cans. I just feel like because we do have protein from the beans, we don't necessarily need that much chicken. So I'm going to go with 1 can. I honestly feel like you could even leave the chicken out if you wanted and have a completely vegetarian meal. So besides that, I've got my bottle of water. This is the larger bottle. It contains about 2 cups. And I have some chicken bouillon here because I wanted 2 cups of chicken broth. So if they had the cans at Dollar Tree that were this size of chicken broth, I could have just used a can of that. I couldn't find cans that size. I could only find the cartons. So I'm going to do the bottle of water with the chicken bouillon. This is a granulated powdered bouillon, which in general, this is what I prefer to use. I don't like to worry about the cubes having to dissolve and worrying that it's not going to dissolve and spread evenly throughout the dish. But in this case, it would have been easier if I could have found the bouillon cubes because I could have just stuck a whole cube into the bag and not worried about it. Because this is a granulated powder, I'm going to put some of this into a small baggie. And then the final item that I have here is a thing of the Velveeta cheese sauce just to drizzle over the top when it's done and give it a little bit of extra cheesiness since we can't really do shredded cheese shelf stable from Dollar Tree. They also make a jalapeno version of this one, so if your family likes it spicy, I think that would be really good over the top of this enchilada bake. So I'm going to start by divvying up the rice, and I'm just going to put it into this Ziploc quart-sized bag because I know I'm using this today. I think anytime within a year or maybe even more, things like pasta and rice will be pretty fine in a Ziploc bag as long as you don't have a big pest problem. If you do, I would definitely use a glass mason jar probably. But I'm going to use this bag, and a pound of rice should be about 2 cups. So I'm going to go ahead and measure 2 cups of this rice into the bag. Of course, if Dollar Tree sold the 1 pound bags like Walmart does, or if you choose to get your ingredients from a different store and not limit yourself to Dollar Tree, you can just use a 1 pound bag of rice. Dollar Tree does have a 1 pound bag of jasmine rice and brown rice. I thought the jasmine rice would be a little bit weird in this just because I think of that as going with like Asian dishes, but it probably would have been just fine. And the brown rice just takes a little bit longer to cook, which is why I went with the white rice this time. It also doesn't store as long because of the oils that are in it. But we're not really intending these to be stored for very long periods of time. We usually try to keep these meals no longer than a year, you know, on our shelf and try to rotate them out, use them and replace them with fresh meals. All right, so here I've got my approximately 1 pound of rice. I don't know, Alexa tells me that 1 pound of rice is actually 2 3/4 cups, so this might be a little bit less than a pound, but I do think this will work. Now for the chicken bouillon, I'm just going to put it into this bag right here and try to make my own little seasoning pack. I like to use these kind of bags when I'm putting little bits of seasonings into meal kits like this. The other thing I've done that works really well is little baby food jars. I sometimes get those from my sister, so if you know anyone who has a baby, you can go ahead and save some baby food jars. They have some really little ones, so even if you're just putting a little teeny bit of seasoning away, they can still work pretty well. But I like these bags. So here is this granulated bouillon. I was actually kind of excited to find this at Dollar Tree because, like I said, I prefer to use the granulated bouillon in most cases. They had chicken, beef, and vegetable. Now I'm going to go ahead and put 2 teaspoons in here because that's going to be equivalent to 2 cups of broth when I add it with 2 cups of water. Now this could be heat sealed above the zipper if you wanted. That's what we do when we store certain things away in bags like this, but I think this will be fine just using the zipper seal. If you did heat seal it, you could use an impulse sealer or you could use a hair straightener or anything like that and just seal it above the little tear strip so that you could still open it easily. I'm going to go ahead and add my can of chicken, my can of enchilada sauce, my can of black beans, my can of corn, my bottle of water, my packet of rice, and then I'm going to go ahead and add all my seasonings. I've got my chicken bouillon packet, my taco seasoning packet, and my cheese sauce that I'm going to put on the top. There it is. To put this meal together, once again, I'm using a 9x13 pan. You could use disposable. I'm going to add my rice. I'm going to add my enchilada sauce. And I was super excited to find this paste enchilada sauce at Dollar Tree because they usually have sort of a no-name brand. So this is the actual name brand. This is something new that I hadn't seen there before. I usually see that other brand. Maybe now that they raised the price to $1.25, they can afford to bring us classier stuff. I'm going to go ahead and add my can of corn, and I am not going to drain this can of corn. I'm going to leave the liquid in. Just like I said, conserving as much liquid as we can be important in emergencies. There's also going to be some flavor and some sodium and things like that that our body needs in the liquid of this can. I'm going to add my can of black beans. Now this one I am going to actually drain and rinse just because the liquid in black beans I find is kind of a icky color, and I just don't really like to include that in my dishes usually. So, but that could be up to you in the situation you're in, whether you want to drain it, save it, whatever you want to do. I know the liquid from a can of garbanzo beans can actually be used as an egg substitute, so I don't know if there's any handy uses for black bean liquid. So now I'm going to add my black beans now that they're drained and rinsed. I'm going to add my can of chicken. Once again, I am leaving the liquid right in this can. That's going to add some flavor to our dish. And now all there is left to do is add my seasoning, so my taco seasoning and my chicken bouillon. And then I'm just going to add my water and we're going to mix it all up. All right, so now I'm just going to mix this around, and I am going to go ahead and cover this one with foil. Whenever you do these kind of bakes where the rice or the pasta cooks right in the pan, you always want to cover it up to make sure that the moisture stays in enough to cook those items. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one in the oven at 425, and I'm going to give it 20 minutes and give it a stir and then see how much longer it needs. Okay guys, check this out. Wow, this smells so amazing. All the rice is cooked. Everything is soft and ready to go. This was in the oven for 20 minutes. And then I took it out and I stirred it up and I put it back in for another 25. And after that it was almost done and I put it back in for 15 minutes. But honestly, I think that 10 minutes might have been okay. If I had checked it after 10, I bet it would have been done. This smells so good. But I am going to go ahead and put our Velveeta on over the top. I do actually wish I would have gotten the jalapeno one for this. I think that would have been really good. So I usually just knead these pouches a little bit to make sure that they're well mixed. And then I'm going to snip off the edge of this one and just go ahead and drizzle this over the top. There, now you could either spread that out if you wanted it to be a little bit more even, or I kind of like it like this because you can still see, you know, the corn and the beans and all the different ingredients in this. All right, let's go ahead and serve this up. Now, if you're the kind of person who likes to have toppings on your Mexican style food, you can try these from Dollar Tree. This is what I use a lot of the time for that. It's a guacamole style dip, so it's not real guacamole. It does have a little bit of real avocado in it if you look at the ingredients, but I love to put sour cream on top of food like this, and so this kind of satisfies that cool, sort of tangy, you know, feeling that you get from sour cream, and this is shelf stable, so it does have a nice pop top. I actually love this stuff. I know it seems kind of strange, but so I'll go ahead and put a little dollop of that on top, and there we go. The next dish that I'm going to be making is a chicken bacon ranch pasta bake. This is just a shelf-stable adaptation of a popular internet recipe. It's pretty simple, it's very delicious, and it's also a kid-pleasing type of recipe. So let's get going. So for this chicken bacon ranch pasta bake, we're going to be using a box of the penne pasta from Dollar Tree. Now keep in mind the boxes of pasta at Dollar Tree are usually 20 ounces. They're a little bit bigger than the 1 pound boxes that you'd usually find at a grocery store. So keep that in mind if you're trying to switch it up with ingredients from different stores. We're going to be using 1 packet of ranch dressing mix from this box of 3 that they sell at Dollar Tree. Another option that you could use from Dollar Tree is I have recently started finding this ranch dressing mix or ranch seasoning in a bulk jar. From Dollar Tree, it's not as large as the bulk jars you would buy elsewhere, but for $1.25, this is a good deal. It does have more seasoning mix in it than the 3 packets, so it's a little bit more economical. Of course, if you use this, you'd have to measure out the amount of 1 packet and put it into some kind of a container. The next thing I'm going to be adding is 2 cans of chicken and 2 cans of the Alfredo sauce that they have at Dollar Tree. I'm going to be adding a box of chicken broth, a carton. This is about 4 cups in here. I'm going to be adding a container of bacon bits. These are bacon flavored bits. They're not real bacon. I've never seen real bacon bits that I can remember sold at my Dollar Tree, but let me know if you've ever seen them at your Dollar Tree. If you can get them, of course, that would be better. It would be preferable. So if you don't limit yourself to Dollar Tree and you're not on a really tight budget, you could buy the small bags of real bacon bits from Walmart or anywhere else. I'm also going to be using some Parmesan cheese from this container. Make sure you get the small container that's real Parmesan cheese and not the larger container. And I'm going to be using a jar of this asparagus. I was really pretty excited to find this at Dollar Tree. I've recently started seeing this. It's just a little bit different and a little bit fancier. And typically what I would put into a dish like this would probably be broccoli. And you're not going to find any kind of shelf-stable broccoli at Dollar Tree. So I thought this was about the closest that I could get to the broccoli in order to give it a little bit of veggie and a little bit of green color. And you don't have to use the asparagus. If you don't like asparagus, by all means, you can substitute it with something like green beans. You could leave it out entirely and just serve a different veggie or fruit of your choice on the side. When I'm doing an emergency meal like this, if I can get it all in one dish, I like to do that, because usually if you're utilizing a meal like this, you might not want to be dirtying up extra dishes and extra pots and pans and serving dishes and things. So it's nice if you can get it all into one container. And of course, this is not a huge jar of asparagus. So if you wanted, you could always add a second jar. Yes. I'm going to go ahead and add in the penne pasta and the chicken broth. I'm going to add in the 2 cans of Alfredo, the 2 cans of chicken, the jar of asparagus, the jar of Parmesan cheese, the little container of bacon bits, and of course the packet of ranch dressing mix. And now it is all ready to go. I'm going to start by first adding my box of penne pasta to my baking dish. This is a 9x13 baking dish. As usual, you could use a disposable baking dish if you wanted to add one to your kit. Certain times you might be using these, it would be nice not to have a dish to wash. Once again, if you don't have an oven, if your power's out and all you have is an electric oven, this could be done in a pot, like done in a stove, on the stovetop in a pot. But some other options would be your camp oven or a Dutch oven. This would work great in a Dutch oven. So I'm just going to add our pasta to the dish and our ranch dressing mix. I'm going to go ahead and add that into the dish. I'm going to go ahead and add our bacon bits. Now I'm going to go ahead and add our 2 cans of Alfredo. I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 cans of chicken. Leave the liquid right in these cans. It's just a little bit of extra chicken broth. It's going to add a little more moisture to our dish and a little more flavor, and we don't want to waste any liquid in a situation where, you know, water might be a precious resource. So usually I try to incorporate the broth or the water, the liquid, right into the dish in something like this. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add my whole carton of chicken broth. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some of this Parmesan cheese, probably about half of the bottle. Just to give it some flavor in there, and then we're going to leave the rest for topping it at the end and for serving alongside. Now the asparagus, because canned vegetables are already cooked in the can and they tend to be a little bit mushy, I don't want to stir this in right now. I don't want to have it cooking too long, and I don't want to have it breaking up from so much stirring, because this will need to be stirred several times while it cooks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these aside, and while this is in the oven, I'm going to chop these up into smaller pieces, and they'll be ready to put in closer to the end. So now I'm just going to give this a stir until everything is equally distributed, and then we're going to put it into a 425-degree oven. Now don't worry too much about how you're stirring this, because it is going to get stirred several more times during the cooking process. So now that I've got it pretty well mixed, I'm just going to make sure that all of the pasta is submerged under the liquid as best I can. I'm going to go ahead and put some foil on the top of this and get it into the oven to get it started. I'm going to bake it for 20 minutes to begin with, and then I'm going to stir it and bake it some more. Ooh, you can hear that sizzle. So this has been baking 20 minutes, stirred, baked 20 more, and then stirred, and I baked it one more time for 10 minutes. So this is definitely done. Pasta is soft. Sauce is thickened, so I'm going to go ahead and add in those asparagus. Now this actually made a huge amount of food. This made a huge casserole. So now that I'm thinking about it, since I pretty much used 2 of a lot of things, you could totally divide this in half. You could measure out half of that box of pasta and just use 1 can of Alfredo, 1 can of chicken. You could still use the whole thing of asparagus. You could use a can of chicken broth instead of the carton, because that's going to be about half as much. And you could just take a little baggie and divide out half of the bacon bits, half of a packet's worth of ranch seasoning, and was there something else? I think that was it. So you could do that into a little baggie or a little container. Oh, the Parmesan cheese. That you could either divide out or you could just leave the whole amount. So just gonna spread this out here. I gotta tell you, I was impressed with these bacon bits. They taste a lot better than I expected them to, and they kind of held up a lot better in the baking than I expected them to. They almost have the texture of actual bacon if you were to cook it in a dish like this. I thought they'd get soggy and be kind of gross, but I think the worst thing that happened is they kind of gave it a little bit of a pinkish hue, because obviously they're artificial bacon bits. They probably have some artificial colors in there. So if you're against that, then like I said, you could leave them out, or you could get real bacon bits at a different store. But honestly, if you're worried about artificial things in your food, you probably aren't going to eat bacon anyway. So I'm just going to sprinkle on a little bit more of the Parmesan cheese on the topping. And then I'm just going to pop this back in the oven with no foil on the top, just to kind of let it brown a little bit on the top, and then it's going to be done. All right, guys, here she is. I'm just going to let this cool off a little bit before I serve it. Okay, it is ready to serve. Wow, that looks and smells delicious. And it also tastes delicious. The next recipe I'm going to do is a nice hearty corn chowder. This is a really delicious recipe. This is basically, I adapted this from a recipe that I got from a friend of mine years ago, and it came out of one of those slow cooker cookbooks. And it's really yummy, and a lot of the ingredients, pretty much all of the ingredients, were already shelf stable, so it lent itself really well to this concept. So for this corn chowder, we're going to be using a can of cream of mushroom soup, a can of diced potatoes, 2 cans of corn. I've got cream style and regular corn here. The original recipe calls for diced ham, so I'm going to be using some of this luncheon loaf, which is basically Dollar Tree's version of Spam. And the soup also uses some milk, so I've got this box of whole milk. This is a little bit more than I need, so I'm going to use some of the milk to mix up this Just Add Milk biscuit mix to have biscuits to go along with the soup. I'm also going to serve some peaches alongside, and I've also got crackers that can go with the soup. I'm basing this off of a recipe from a crock-pot cookbook, so I usually do cook this soup in the crock-pot. It is a little bit different, but I'm going to do this a stovetop version and cook it on my emergency burner. I've got a lot of items here, so I'm going to be using the big bag. I'm going to go ahead and stick the milk in first, and then the crackers. I will put in our 2 cans of corn, our can of potatoes, can of peaches, cream of mushroom soup, the luncheon loaf, and the biscuit mix. Now, I do realize the luncheon loaf isn't the healthiest thing. A lot of people don't love this stuff, but it's very little in here that's going to be spread throughout the soup to give it some extra flavor and some extra protein. So the first thing I'm going to start with is just by mixing up these biscuits, because this is going to use a half a cup of milk, and I just want to make sure that I know what milk I'm using for the biscuits. Now, I actually prefer the Just Add Water biscuit mix because all you need is water. But Dollar Tree, at least not right now, they don't have the Just Add Water one, at least not my Dollar Tree, just the Just Add Milk. And since we're using milk in this recipe, that will be fine. So I always like to shake these milks really well before I open them. And of course, if you were drinking this, you'd want to refrigerate it first if you could, if you had refrigeration. But we're not going to be drinking it. We're just going to be cooking with it unless we have a little left over. So it just calls for a half a cup of milk. Probably could have chosen a better utensil than this to mix these biscuits, but all right, so these look pretty well mixed. And you're just supposed to drop these onto a baking sheet, but I'm going to use this pan instead just because it's got a nice nonstick coating on it. I like this pan. I think it'll work okay. So drop my tablespoonfuls. This is going to be about a tablespoonful. So this obviously makes drop biscuits, so that will be fine. I may run out of room. I didn't think this little bag would make very many biscuits, but... All right, we'll call that good to start with. And these are just going in the oven at 400 degrees. So the next thing that I have to do is I have to chop up my luncheon loaf, dice it up. Now that's one of these kind of cans that has one of these keys. I really, really despise these cans. I've had really bad experiences. I either cut myself or I break off the tab and I can't get it open, and I really hate them. But I have actually used a military style can opener to open a can like this when I did break off the tab. So let's see how it goes. Oh, so far so good. I honestly don't know why they make cans like this anymore. I just don't get it. See, I always mess it up. Okay, so I am just going to dice this up into small dices. Now my original recipe does not call for frying up these cubes before you put them in. Of course, my original recipe is calling for diced ham. So, you know, you could totally fry these up in the bottom of the pan before you get the soup started. It might make them a little bit more appealing, give them a little bit of browning, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to throw them in because if this was an emergency situation, I doubt I would be taking the time to do that. So now I'm just going to get the stove back out and our pot, and we're really just going to start dumping everything in. I'm going to start with my cream of mushroom soup. Next, I'm going to add both cans of corn, and I'm not going to drain these. Okay, so we get started with that, and I am going to put in my ham, or Spam as the case may be. Next, I'm going to add in my potatoes, and I think I may actually drain these. I know I usually try to save and use the liquid. I'm not sure about the liquid from the potatoes. You know what? I just gave it a little taste, and it just tastes like salty water, so we're just going to use it. Probably has a little starch in it as well, so I did not drain the potatoes. So now the only thing left to go in here is the milk. Now the recipe calls for 2.5 cups of milk. Of course, there's 4 cups in the quart, and we used 1/2 cup for the biscuits. So we have 3.5 cups left, so we have a whole extra cup. So I think I'm going to start by adding the 2.5 cups and just kind of gauge and see if it looks like it can handle some more. And if it does, I will try to put all the rest of the milk in. But if it looks like that will be too much, then I won't, because someone could drink the rest of the milk with their meal if we don't use it. So there's 1, 2, and 1/2. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put the heat on and start warming this up. Now the original recipe for this did call for some chopped onion. So I did pick this up at the Dollar Tree. If you wanted, you could add a little bit of this onion to the soup to give that that element of it that it would be missing without the fresh onion. And the other thing that I am going to tuck into my bag, I think, is the salt and pepper, because I feel like this is a dish that I would definitely want to have salt and pepper with. Of course, if you have packets that you saved from any kind of takeout or anything like that, those would be great to throw in, so you don't have to put in a whole salt and pepper packet. Of course, you could put some salt and pepper into like a little Tic Tac case or something like that. Anything to keep a little salt and pepper in there if you didn't want to stick the whole salt and pepper shaker in. Likewise, if you took all these meal bags and put them into a tote, you know, to gather them all together, you could just stick 1 salt and pepper set and, you know, 1 can opener and all of that right in the tote with it. You know, this really is kind of perfect. I might add a little bit more milk, but I think I'd rather have the soup stay nice and thick and just have the leftover milk for something else. I mean, you could always make another pack of biscuits if you thought you might like it. This is 1 pack. I did eat 1 biscuit just to try it. I think most of those, the first batch I did, got a little bit overcooked because I had to run out, and the second ones I did turned out a lot better because I got them out of the oven in time. But you could use some of that milk to make up more biscuits, or just serve it to someone to drink with their meal. Of course, if you did need to stretch the soup, then absolutely adding the rest of the milk chew the soup, and then just a little bit of extra salt and pepper, and it would be perfectly fine. Okay, we are simmering now. I'm just going to stir this, turn it right down to make sure it doesn't burn on the bottom, because this does have a lot of dairy. Now, I was just thinking, if you are one of those people who's very opposed to the luncheon meat and you don't want to do that, you could definitely leave that out, and this would just be a regular corn chowder. The other couple of things you could do is you could make this into a chicken corn chowder with canned chicken from the Dollar Tree, and you could even do a salmon corn chowder. I don't know if Dollar Tree carries the large cans of salmon. I don't believe that they do, but I know they carry the little pouches, so that would be an option too. Either one of those would make this a lovely chowder if you don't want to use the luncheon meat. But to me, that's very similar to having ham, which is what is typically in here. So, all right, I think this is good. Being the fact that it has dairy in it, we don't want to really boil it too much. So this is definitely piping hot. So this is ready to go. So that was super quick and easy. That was literally just opening a few cans and just dumping everything together and heating it up. And it's super, super, super tasty. Right, there is our lovely chowder. Of course, serving that with some crackers or a biscuit, and then we've also got our peaches to serve alongside. So this is going to be a delicious meal. So the final meal in the bag that I'm going to put together today is not actually a meal, it's actually a dessert. But we all need a sweet treat every now and again. I'm going to be making a Black Forest dump cake, and this concept is something you can do with a lot of different options, a lot of different fruit fillings on the bottom, a lot of different cake types. This is something that's perfect to do in a Dutch oven over charcoal. In fact, this was the recipe where I was taught how to cook in a Dutch oven over charcoal by one of my son's Cub Scout leaders years ago. And we usually make some variation of this dump cake in the Dutch oven over the charcoal every year when we go camping. So I have got a couple of these cans of cherry pie filling. I was pretty excited to find these at Dollar Tree. I've got a box of the chocolate cake mix, and I've got a can of lemon lime soda. This was sold in a 4-pack, I believe. And then I've also got a little can of chocolate frosting that I found at Dollar Tree. Now, we don't usually eat these dump cakes with frosting. We usually either just have them as is, or maybe we'll put a little Cool Whip or whipped cream on them. But this time, because I know we won't have Cool Whip or whipped cream, I did grab this frosting. And then in this kit, I am going to include the baking pan. This is just a 9x13 disposable foil baking pan from Dollar Tree. Now, like I mentioned, with all of those baked dishes that we did earlier, you could include a foil pan if you wanted, just like this. Then you wouldn't have as much cleanup afterwards. I do think you might want to look at those slightly deeper roasting type of pans, maybe, because a couple of those casseroles were pretty full, and I wouldn't want to worry about overflow with one of these. So for this, I am definitely going to be using the bigger bags because of the pan mostly. Now, in the interest of uniformity, or if you didn't want to have to buy 2 different sets of bags, you could just go with the largest bags because everything should fit in that, whereas not everything would fit in the smaller bags. I'm going to start with my cake mix. Then I'm going to add in my 2 cans of pie filling, my can of soda, and my little can of frosting. Then I'm just going to try to slide this baking dish right down in the back behind everything else. There we go. It is all ready to go. Now I'm just going to start with my pan. Now, because I am at home and I have it handy, I did spray this with nonstick cooking spray. But I do think it would be pretty much fine without it. The only thing is the cake would probably stick around the edges a little bit. But because we have it, I did spray it. I'm going to go ahead and open my pie fillings and get those into the bottom of the pan. Just go ahead and get this all spread out. Now, this cake, incidentally, is the perfect candidate for a Dutch oven and charcoal. This is actually the recipe, basically, that I learned to use a Dutch oven with a dump cake. So it's really perfect to just dump your fruit filling in the bottom of the Dutch oven, mix up the cake mix, put it over top, and set it on the coals to bake. In fact, we do that almost every year when we're camping. We do that. Some kind of a dump cake like that. So I'm going to set this aside. And then the next step is going to be just to mix up the cake mix and the soda together. Now, if you were in a pinch, or you just really didn't want to dirty up another dish, or maybe you didn't even have a mixing bowl, we do have an emergency cooking kit that has all of the utensils and, dishes and things that we might need. But if you did not have that, I have actually put the soda right into the bag here with the cake mix before and just kind of mixed it in the bag. It's pretty messy, so I don't really do it anymore like I used to, but it is possible and it can be done. Just something to remember, but we're gonna use a bowl today. And then we're just gonna add this can of soda slowly, and then mix. So now that this is all mixed up, I'm just going to go ahead and pour it right over the cherry filling here. Just get this spread out to the edges. And now I'm just going to go ahead and put this in the 350-degree oven until the cake test's done. Now be careful with these disposable pans because they are not very sturdy on the bottom, so definitely support them. And if you can, sometimes I'll set these on a cookie sheet just so that they stay a little more stable. Okay, so now this is done. It's actually cooled off a lot. I think I was going to put this frosting on before it cooled this much even, but I had to run out, so because I really wanted this frosting to kind of just melt into it almost. You can see, I don't know if you can see the cherry stuff that bubbles up. All right, so let's just put some of this on. And this is still warm enough that it's softening it up at least so that it can spread. It doesn't need to be entirely all over the cake. This is actually going to be the perfect amount of frosting for this one layer cake. There, that looks perfect. There it is. There is our beautiful Black Forest chocolate cake. Okay, friends, those are my 5 new emergency meal kits. If any of these look good to you, put them together and get them stocked in your pantry. You will be glad you did. You can put them on a shelf. You can put them together in a tote. If you do 7 meals at a time, you'll have a week's worth of emergency meals ready to go. It's a good way to get your emergency food storage started or to give it a boost if you've already got it going. Now, I promised you I would show you something new that I found at my Dollar Tree that you could use for easy pantry meals like this. I was pretty excited to see these couple of items on the shelf. These are these Campbell's cooking sauces. There's a creamy Cajun and a garlic honey mustard. That sounded really good. This is a really good deal for $1.25. I have seen these sold for a lot more at Walmart. I think these would be great to make meals with some pasta or some rice, some canned protein, canned veggie. Yum. Anyhow, let me know down below, have you ever found these at your Dollar Tree? And if you did, what flavors have you found? I would like to know if there's any other flavors out there that my Dollar Tree doesn't have. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today while I made these meals. I hope that you enjoyed this and found it helpful and hopefully got a few new ideas for shelf-stable pantry meal kits. If you're not already a subscriber, go ahead and hit that button. We would love to have you, and then you won't miss out on any of our upcoming content. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me one of these shopping bag emojis down in the comments, and check out this playlist for more shelf-stable pantry meal ideas. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.